Here we go. You look great, by the way.
There we go. Put
Like
your
we gotta
kente.
represent.
Kente on. Yes, child.
Oh my God. All right, so we're gonna start. If we really mess up, we can always go back and do it again. I mean, that's the beauty of Zoom.
We'll be good. We'll be good.
We'll be good. All right. So we're gonna jump in 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome to At the Podium with me, Patrick Huey. At the Podium is a multimedia platform that brings together people from a diverse background of lives, careers, and experiences, but all share one thing in common. They have stepped fully into the transformative power of finding and raising their voices to make an impact on the world we all live in today. At the Podium holds a space for everyone to tell their stories, to be heard, and to bring us inspiration. Today, I'm thrilled to share the podium with Gennean Scott. Gennean Scott was raised in a single-parent home of moderate means in the heartland of America. As a young Black dancer in Nebraska, New York City seemed like a world away, but it was a world that she knew she wanted. So in 1992, when she won the Miss Hal Jackson Talented Teens pageant, a trip to New York was a dream come true. She had the opportunity to see her first Broadway musical, Smokey Joe's Cafe. Up until that evening, she knew that Broadway showcased some of the world's most extraordinary talent, but she was not prepared for what she was about to see. Everybody on stage looked like her. The sense of pride she felt watching this show surpassed any other. The audience, made up of all races, ages, and genders, was smiling, laughing, and clapping. The arts had made the audience one. She didn't know it at the time, but that moment would be a catalyst for her crusade in arts and equity. From that pivotal Broadway experience at the age of 16, Gennean would go on to receive her bachelor's degree in education from the University of Nebraska at Omaha and teach for 10 years, where she established herself as an equity crusader in education and the arts. She then joined the administrative team of the Omaha School of Music, a Black-run nonprofit that focused on promoting the arts in underserved communities. She then joined Omaha Performing Arts, where, serving as the Vice President of Human Capital and Inclusion, she, along with the President and CEO of the organization, helped diversify the management team of that organization. Currently, Gennean is the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for the Broadway League. Her mission is clear: representation matters, equity matters. As the League's first head of equity, diversity, and inclusion, she wants everyone to know that they matter. Okay, Gennean, welcome to At the Podium.
Thank you. I am equally as excited.
I have to say that performance of Smokey Joe's Cafe, I was in New York during that show's performance, and I actually saw that show.
Really?
I did. And
Oh my gosh.
And I had the exact same reaction to it that you had, that it was literally, I've always said it was one of my best nights in the American theater.
Look, coming from Nebraska and seeing all that kissed skin on stage, that's been kissed by the sun. And it was just like, I was just like, what the heck? Is this real? Obviously I know they're Black people. I have a whole family full of them, but, just seeing it on stage and yeah, it was transformative. It was transformative.
Well, I'll tell you a very interesting thing about that show was I was living in New York at the time. I had just moved to New York. I was studying at a theater school called Circle in the Square, which is right there on 50th and 7th and Broadway, and it's right next door to the Gershwin. At the time, playing at the Gershwin was a remount of Showboat. So that weekend, one of my friends came to town and her parents had gotten us all theater tickets. And so in that weekend, we had Smokey Joe's Cafe one night, we had Showboat the next night. But we literally saw where Black representation had been to where at that time, Smokey Joe's Cafe was the most current quote unquote Black show on Broadway. And just like the journey of that was not lost on me, even at 21 years old.
To have those experiences as a person as a Black person, to see, to use your words, to see within the 24 hours, you saw where we had been and where we are and where we can be. And that is the power, I think, of theater. And that is the power of the arts. It's to hold a mirror up so that we can see the reflection of where we are, but also to look inside and to see the future.
Ooh.
And I love it. I mean, I obviously I work in it. I love the arts for that reason. It's a great equalizer because we're all in the same space, experiencing the same things. We're internalizing it differently, but we're there and we're there together, and we're all experiencing the same thing. And at that moment, your race, your gender identity, your orientation, none of it really matters, you know? And the arts, yes. Yep.
And it speaks to the power and the real social need to have these moments, these places where people can come together. Because we live in a time right now where so much divides us. I mean, what you eat for breakfast can divide you. What news channel you watch can divide you. And you have these artistic spaces. And I think particularly the theater, because when you have that idea of everyone coming together to create something, there is an energy that's attached to it. There is people's lives, people's souls, people's expertise are embedded in that particular play. And then the audience sits there and they watch it. And you talk about this with Smokey Joe, because it was the first time that you went to New York when you were 16. And you said you were sitting in the audience and everybody was smiling, laughing, enjoying the music, sharing a communal experience. And that's what arts do.
Yes. And that is what everyone should experience. Everyone should have the opportunity to experience theater the way that you and I have.
Right. It has changed my life. I don't know what I would have done or where I would have been if I hadn't have had a theatrical background and had parents who supported it too.
That's a big thing. But here's the thing. I also, I think about that experience, and I think about growing up as a dancer. And then I also think about the realism of the life that we live in.
Yeah.
And how the discretionary income that it takes for many of us, not all of us, but many of us, to be able to have those types of experiences. And how do we make it so that it's accessible to all and not just a select few? And I guess, that's why I'm here.
That's the question. How does the experience that we were able to have, how does that become available to everybody? And that is the question around proper nutrition. That is the question around proper education. That is the question around world travel. Is how do you make that available to people who do not live in a zip code, or who do not live in an area where that is readily available to them? That is the question. That, my dear Hamlet, is the question. We're talking theater today. We can talk about that.
Yes, it is. It is a $1 million question. If I can go on a tangent for a minute, I opened up a studio in Omaha because of this exact question. And it is a nonprofit studio geared towards, obviously we service everybody, but we targeted those marginalized communities. So I'm talking about social economic status. So it didn't matter because there are poor white people too, and there are poor people of color. Poor people exist all around the globe. Let's just be honest. And then also targeting specifically people of color, because where do we have a space where we can feel psychologically safe, where we can walk in and we know that that person gets us, where, growing up as a dancer, it's like, oh, you have to put your hair in a bun, baby, baby. A slick back bun at that. Okay, product was not as readily available back then as it is now. Okay. But seriously, though, I mean, those little things that we take that some others take for granted is real for us. Flesh color tights, that is not my color flesh. I assure you, it is not. So I look like I'm mixed match. I'm white on the bottom, black up top, and that doesn't look good. I mean, so all of those little things that I don't think anyone even thought about always made me feel like an outsider.
Hmm.
I don't think that they realized it. And so creating that safe space for those dancers, male and female, was always something that I knew I needed to do and I wanted to do. And so when I had the opportunity, I mean, look, I wasn't rich. I took a tax refund check and I opened up a studio because that's how important it was to me. And because of that, and then because of my position within the organization, I was able to expose those dancers to Broadway, to Alvin Ailey, to Dance Theater of Harlem, Philadelphia, you name it, Martha Graham. I mean, you name it, they were able to see that. And to me, that's how we start. We have to get into the communities in which people live, and we have to develop relationships.
Oof.
And that's how we start to get people to come in. I mean, we're not new to theater. Black people aren't new to theater. We did Easter speeches. We had Christmas plays. We had a fine arts department within our church. We're not new to the arts. We may be new to Broadway.
You have this really amazing position with the Broadway League. You decide to apply for the position in 2020. And then you situate this pivotal moment of your life and career in the swirling state of America and the world, really, following George Floyd's murder in that first COVID summer of 2020. And you write, you said, I thought to myself, you tell your children and those dancers at the academy to take risks. You teach them to bet on themselves. Now it's time for you to walk that walk and show them. And I did. I hit submit and got sick. With every interview, my confidence grew, and so did my anxiety. This is what you write about your process with the Broadway League. So why is it so hard for us to take risks and to bet on ourselves? Why is that?
You know what? That is a really good question. Why? No one's ever asked me why. They're just like, I get it. There are two reasons. One, I think because I think historically in my DNA, I've been taught to be safe and not take the risks because we can't financially afford to take those risks. So you're comfortable. So why would you go and change that up? And so I think that was one of the reasons, because it's like, I can't afford to fail. I go hard in the paint every day, all the time, because failing is not an option for me. I don't have a trust fund. What the wealth I make is what I make. And I recognize that. And so I think that scared me. I think that scares a lot of people who are like me in that situation where they don't come from a family of means. And I hate to keep going back, but systemically, when you think about how this country was founded, it's like if we played a game of Monopoly and I held you out for the first 20 rounds, Patrick, I acquire all the wealth, I acquire all the land, and then I start to let you play. Well, can you really afford to land on my property? Can you really afford to keep continuing around that board? And so I think about that. And I think that that is one of the reasons that I was so nervous, is because I got comfortable and it was safe. And I think that's why a lot of us do it, because we're safe. It's safe.
That is such a great analogy for what systemic racism feels like. And for what it feels like when you're not part of whatever the monolithic thing is that's happening. It's like playing 20 rounds of Monopoly have gone past, and then they finally let you in, and charge you rent on every spot that you land on. I mean, it's really, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why. And then it was like, oh my God, this might be real. This is New York. And then the cost of living is 60% higher than in Nebraska. And, I was a single parent, and and it's like, okay, but now I finally have means. I finally have a home of my own, and I have investments, and I'm like really doing it. And now I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try something else. What the heck is wrong with me? I mean, like I thought I might needed, to commit myself for a minute. But at the same time, it's like we have to edify ourselves. And I have great friends and I have a great mentor who also poured into me and said, you can do it. You're doing it now. You can do it on a larger scale. Why not? And I'm like, yeah, that's what I tell the kids. Why not? Why not me? Why not me?
Because you had proven yourself in Omaha. You had proven yourself. You had gone into this organization, this very traditional organization, and probably what would be perceived as a harder organization because you were in Nebraska and you went into Omaha and you were able to really bring to life this concept, the concept of equity, diversity, and inclusion. You were actually doing it.
Yeah, I mean, Nebraska is pretty homogenous. Let's just be honest. When I say Nebraska, people don't think of people who look like me or you. They think of something totally different. Okay, and yes, there are Black people there, and yes, there is a city there. It's a city lifestyle. But when I started, I talked to, I looked around and I was like, oh my gosh, there are not that many of us. My boss, our President CEO Joan Squires, she was just like, look, and I'm paraphrasing. She was like, look, this is a white organization. Our audience is white. We white. This is not okay with me. And she didn't say it like that, but I'm saying it like that. And she's like, this is not okay with me. We need to do better. And she charged me with it, even though I'd already charged myself with it. But to have the CEO of the organization, who is a white woman, say, this is unacceptable, and I want you to create the plan, and I'm going to support you. And she called a meeting. I'll never forget the day we had an incident. She called a meeting, a stand-up meeting. We all came in, and all managers and department heads all came in, and she was like, look, we're adding inclusion to our statement, to our core values. We have created a diversity statement. And this is before George Floyd. This was before some of the other public things, because let's be real, we know we've been dealing with this for a long time. But before all of that type of thing, she said, I don't want any more hires to go all the way through if we haven't looked at a person of color. Wow. She laid the groundwork. And I'm telling you, there are times we had to start over, because I'm in Nebraska and there ain't that many people of color, but we had to start over. And with her leadership, we were able to totally flip it on its head, created a leadership program for people of color within our organization. So, because it's not that we don't have the skills, and it's not that we aren't out there, it's that we just had never had the opportunity or had anyone who was a gatekeeper to say, take the door off the hinges. This door will never close again.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I think there is a perception that the artistic world is much further along in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion than the rest of the world. But and you and I both know, because you came from a world of dance, I came from a world of theater and acting, that the artistic world is subject to the same challenges that happen elsewhere. Why is that? Because artists tend to be people who look at the world through a different lens, who may be more sensitive, who may have a different vulnerability, and yet we still face sometimes major issues around race and identity within particularly the theater world, which sometimes may be the slowest to change compared to film or television or even the visual arts. Why do you think that is?
I have two thoughts on that. My first thought is that on stage, you see more diversity than you do behind the stage. We have always performed for white people. So I think that it's easier, or it has been easier for others to see us as performers because we've always been doing that. Because there was a time where they thought our brain didn't have the capacity to make informed decisions. Um, Hence why you don't see that many Black quarterbacks. But I digress. Uh, so I think us getting into the administrative leadership roles is taking more time because we have had to unpack all of those biases that were at play. It was easier for them to accept us to be on stage. And then you think about the systems that have been at play, and you think about generational wealth and discretionary income. And a lot of us did not have that. I think now we do. And so now we're able to go see the theater and then have our children or our children's children say, I want to do that. And then also say, well, wait a minute, there's a whole business side to this. Okay, well, you know what? I don't want to act. I like money. I like the finance part, or I like booking the talent. I like casting. And so then they start to say, and so I think we're slowly moving into that, to the administrative side. I think on stage, we've done a really great job
Mm.
of diversifying, um, or creating diversity on stage. But behind the scenes, I don't know that we've done that great of a job.
Well, and people don't understand how production and producing works, and that the producers and the writers create the content for the most part. And so if those people are not people of color, it's very hard in the best case scenario to have people move past their own implicit biases. People create stuff that reflects their view of the world.
Mhm.
That's why things like representation matter, which is why things like having integrated systems matter. Because if your view of the world does not hold a space for people who don't look like you, then you will create work that does not look like the rest of the world but yourself. And that is
Right.
valid work. That is valid work. It is not about the validity of the work. It is about what is the broad scope that this work can, what is the broad scope of humanity that this work can represent and can reach. That's the piece that I think people don't understand.
Exactly.
So it makes it doubly hard. And then you layer in all the pieces like we're not smart enough, we don't know what we're doing, we don't have the
Mhm.
capacity to understand how to produce, write, direct, etc. But that being said, we move forward.
Yes,
We move
we
forward.
always move forward. I think we as a people have a history of overcoming. I I mean, growing up, I didn't always like being Black because I was always surrounded by white people. Yeah, it made me different. It didn't make me feel like I was a part. And I'm like, oh, I want my skin to be lighter. Oh, why is my hair not straight? And I went through that. But now that I'm older, I'm like, oh my gosh, the resiliency that we have had to have. And what better people to be? I descend from slaves. My great grandparents were sharecroppers. I know the shack, like it is still there. The 2-room shanty, it's still there. And we drive by when we're in Texas and to see and to know where we came from. Now I am so proud of my culture and who I am, but we can go on and talk about the education system. But growing up when I was like a little girl, before I started realizing, you know, the history of our people. And it really took my grandparents to tell me, wait a minute, what are you talking about? You want to have light skin and you putting this gown over your head, to make it your long hair and you swinging it. It took them to tell me those things. And it's like, wow. And so now I have a daughter and I instill in her, like, get beyond what you see on TV and beyond what they say the beauty norms are, and see you and see yourself. And that's why it's important to tell those stories on stage and to tell them accurately. That's why it's important for us to see Black people on stage, not just being the stereotype and being the doctors, like Claire Huxtable, who was an attorney. That's why we need to see those things, because then we know, okay, well, we can do that and it's real.
Representation matters. When people look up, they need to see themselves. I think it's a part of the responsibility of the arts. When you create. You got to create a space for everyone to exist and see themselves in. It's good for humanity. That should be enough. But if it isn't, it's great for economics. I mean, look at what Hamilton did.
Say that again.
Right? I mean, if that made you doubt that there is a space for people of different races, colors, ethnicities to inhabit a world. And see, here's the thing about I don't want to start preaching, but here's the thing about plays that I've never understood. It's not real. I will never forget, Gennean, when I was in college and we were doing a play called Bloody Poetry, which was a play about, Mary Shelley and Byron and all those people and the writing of Frankenstein and all of that. And I really wanted to be Shelley in this play. This was my senior year of college. And there were legitimate conversations about whether a Black person could play an historically white person. And I have no anger towards these people, none. That's the time that we lived in. But it has always mystified me why we expect verisimilitude in a play where people are singing and dancing. It's not real. So it should open up the door for more people to be expressed within that. And I've never understood why we can't make that leap so easily.
Well, can we talk about how actors used to go on in blackface and used to play Black people?
The vaudeville circuit. Yeah.
The vaudeville circuit. So you can't really say that.
I mean, the first talkie was Al Jolson in blackface, the jazz singer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so look, here's the thing. And not that is okay, because it is never acceptable. Let's be honest. It is made up. I remember there was a big to-do when I think it's Halle was cast for The Little Mermaid. And people were like, The Little Mermaid is white. Dude, tell me when you saw a mermaid. I want to know. When did you see a mermaid? Let me know. I want to know.
Okay, so I want to flip this on its head a little bit. I want your opinion on this because we are speaking from a very specific point of view about this. I wonder if in the equity, diversity, and inclusion space, is there an implicit assumption that there is a monolithic experience for people who are non-white and that we sort of get lumped together in this non-white experience? Is that potentially a space that is becoming a space for acceptable bias? Do we run that risk?
Yeah, yes, we do run that risk because there is a such thing as overcorrecting, if that makes, it's like, okay, well, we've left everybody out. Okay, now we're going to include everybody, and everybody is this, and that's not true. I would like for the mainstream to understand that as complex as they are, we are as well. And there are many layers to us. And my experience is not the same as an Asian or Pacific Islanders experience, who's not the same as an Afro-Latina or Afro-Latina experience. Just because they may be Black or seen as Black, but they're historically from Latin America, their experience is totally different than mine as a Black American. We don't talk about that. Sometimes we don't even recognize that. And it's not fair, but I think that's why it's even more important that those rooms are diverse. And it is more important that we get outside of our social circle and that our friends don't just look and think and act like us. Our friends need to be as diverse as the world, because I think it's within that discourse that we really, we come to the heart, and then I can start to maybe not agree with their perspective, but I can see their perspective and I can have a little bit of appreciation, and then they can appreciate mine. But at the end of the day, we may not all agree. So I think yes, we do run that risk, but I like to think that with people like myself, people like you and other folks out there who have their finger on the pulse of theater and the arts, can say we need to make sure that our rooms are as diverse as the world that we live in.
You talk about the importance of dance in your life and what dance gave you. You talk about the importance of creating a diverse world. How did that begin for you? Who nurtured that within you?
Oh my gosh. So there's Sonia McSwain, who is in Nebraska, and Fabian Hayden, who is Black, also in Nebraska, and Debbie Allen, who does not know me, but in my mind is my best friend. Um, I and Coco from Fame, who also doesn't know me and is also my best friend in my head. Um, and seeing them, I felt like I could do this. I can be this. And having them pour into me and say, you may be the only, person of color at your white studio, but it doesn't matter. They need to see you. And they need to see you and they need to see you. They need to see your commitment. They need to see that you want it. And they need to see people like you just because they need to see people like you. They need to see me and I needed to see them because I need to know how to navigate in a world that is more than just Black, because the world is not Black. And I need to know how to move in both spaces.
Yeah.
And my mother, I remember I wanted to quit because I felt like, I'll never forget the day we'd like audition for like a solo. And if it was sassy, if it was jazz, most of the time I'd get it. But if it was a lyrical type of thing, I didn't necessarily get it. And my mother was just like, I don't care if you didn't get it because you're not going to always get what you want.
Wow.
You're not quitting because I didn't raise a quitter. You're going to fight until you get whatever it is. And so she gave me that spirit of keep going, keep going. I don't care if they tell you no. Keep going. They tell you no, you're in the same spot you were in before. One day you're going to get a yes. Keep going. And so I don't even know that she realizes that she did that indirectly because she wasn't trying to be profound. She was just like, look, I ain't raising no quitter. You got to get out there. I done paid all this good money. Go get your butt out there. I don't care what they give you. You
Put
gonna
on
get
the
it, you're
red
gonna
dress.
own it. Put on that red dress
Be
and own
jazzy.
that role and do what you and make sure that everybody is looking at you. They're all going to be looking at you anyway because you're the only Black person.
I think that story, that person in your life who says, get back out there, that's the key. And it's not always your mother. I mean, you're lucky if it's your mother. That's the teacher, that's the pretend auntie, that's the grandmother. Like, get out there and do the thing that you care about. What does dance give you? What did dance give you? Because you were at a time when there was no Misty Copeland, so that had to be something deep within you because you were having to generate your own vision as a dancer. So what did it give you? What does it give you?
Well, it gave me a way to express myself. And now I can say this because I have the vocabulary. I didn't have it then. My childhood was not rosy by any stretch of the imagination. But I could go there in my uniform and I could go there and I could be free. I could be whatever that character was. I mean, it's kind of just like theater. I could embody whatever routine it was and I could escape that reality that I had at home. And so dance was an escape. It was a freedom. And then the performing aspect of it was, I mean, like, oh my God, you're clapping for me. It did something for my confidence. I was like, oh, they're looking at me. Okay, well, let me give them a show. It gave me an escape. It gave me an opportunity to find confidence at a time where I didn't necessarily feel so confident. But when I was on stage, I knew it. I knew I can execute whatever routine. And I knew that I was a natural performer. And so it gave me a confidence in me that I didn't have outside in the real world. Although I could fake it. I mean, because if you ask anybody who went to school, they have been like, oh my gosh, oh, she was stuck up, she was this, she was that. But the reality is I didn't have any of those things, but they didn't know what I was dealing with at home. They didn't know the struggles that I had, but it taught me how to have confidence. And then before long, I actually had that confidence and I was no longer faking it.
Wow. At 19, your life changes. You become a single mom. Can you talk about that experience and how you actually avoided becoming a statistic and how you
Yeah.
broke that cycle?
My mother had me at 19, which is part of the struggle that I had. My mom had me at 19, and I was hell bent that I was not going to be a teenage mom. I am not going to have a kid at 19. We are not going to struggle like I had to. You know how you are when you're young, you think all those things, and
Yes.
then you turn 19 and you get pregnant.
Like, here we go.
Wow. But my mother said to me, my mom and my stepdad, because by this time she'd married, and they were like, we will do whatever we have to do to help you to finish your education because you got to get a college degree. You're going to get a college degree. You're going to get a good job. You're going to get a college degree. You're going to be a teacher. You're going to have a good job, good paying job. and and so with the help of my parents who watched my son, I worked full time because I didn't want to be a statistic, but yet I was still on government assistance because I wasn't making enough money. But I worked full time. I went to school full time, and I was there for my son. And what I would tell my son every day is that I parented differently than what my parents parented me, because I realized that some of the patterns and the cycles that repeated itself were because of how I was parented. Does that make sense? And no shade, mom. I'm sorry, no shade. But it was. We didn't have kind of that open dialogue about where babies come from and how you live life and those types of conversations. And I had those conversations with him. I mean, we had candid conversations. I would smile and I would say, okay, well, let's talk about it. But in reality, I was like, oh my God, no, but we had those conversations. And then I was real with them. I was like, look, you got to get out of Omaha. You cannot go to school here. I need you to do better. I need you to be better. Your network is going to be your net worth. And if your network is small, your net worth is going to be small. And I don't want that for you. And you will not go to school in Nebraska. And the next day we went down to K-State and I was like, we're going on a tour, we're doing this. And he did. And he went to school, he got a partial scholarship. He graduated in finance and business administration and finance. And, still to this day, we have really candid conversations about life. And I think that's how I helped to prevent, that cycle from repeating itself, was just being real.
I was recently at a talk here in Boston where one of Mayor Wu's cabinet officers was speaking about the distinction between motion and progress in social issues. And it seems in issues of race and the cycle of teenage pregnancy and poverty and not having proper education and issues around inclusion and diversity, and there's a lot of motion, but then where's the progress? And I think with your son and how you approached being real with him, we see some progress. How do we take the approach that you took with your son to move from motion to progress? Is it even possible? Do we just have to say, listen, you're going to be redlined in districts where your votes don't count. You're going to not have the best access to medicine and to healthcare and to education if you're a person of color in America?
One, I think people look at the whole mountain or the whole pie, and I look at chipping at it bit by bit, because I think if you look at the whole thing in totality, you get overwhelmed and you start to feel defeated because you don't see, you want to see this and you don't see it, and you want to see it in this time. But it took a whole lot of years for us to get to where we're at. It's going to take a whole lot more years to undo some of these systems that have been at play. And so I try not to look at the whole problem, and I try to take it piece by piece by piece by piece. And and then start filling in, in the middle. So I think we have to get out of that notion of everything must change and it must change tomorrow, because that's not the reality and that's not the real world that we live in. The world that we live in, the system that we live in is full of policies, full of laws, full of ish. All right. And we've got to slowly chip away. I mean, like, it just now became what, a hate crime to lynch, right? I mean, wasn't that
That was with this administration. That was with the
yeah,
Biden administration.
just now in 2022?
Yeah.
We're able to pass that bill. There are some things that we can do right now and we can change right now. And then there are some things that are going to take a little bit longer. And I think we need to celebrate every milestone we get. First Black woman Supreme Court justice, judge.
No.
Like, we got to take our wins. Kamala, first vice president. Black woman vice president, Black vice president. We got to take our wins. Obama, we got to take our wins. But that doesn't mean we rest on those laurels. We just have to chip at it piece by piece by piece. And then I think we'll start to, we can look back and we'll see what it is that we've done. But it's going to take time.
I just want to make sure, and I always ask myself, have we accepted the superficial things that represent progress in lieu of some of the real things, some of the real things that really matter when you're talking about, to me, it's still access to education, is being able to go to a voting booth and vote. And that's up for grabs right now. It's being able to move into the neighborhood where you want to live. And Martin Luther King even said, people should be able to move into the neighborhood of the house they want as far as their money can carry them. And that can't always happen today in some places.
I'm looking for a house right now, let me tell you.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm afraid of is that I'm looking at the neighborhood and I'm like, are they going to welcome me and my Black child?
Yeah.
Or am I going to be paying a mortgage for a house that in a non-welcoming environment?
Yeah. You say that your story is still being written.
Mm-hmm.
But what have you learned about your life from your narrative thus far?
That I am God's favorite child.
I thought I was.
You can be, I guess, but just know that I'm the other favorite. All right. Seriously, I look at where I've been and I look at how I've come to be, and I believe in God, obviously. God put something inside of me that won't let me quit.
Yes.
And God put something in me and he said, you know what? I am summoning all of your ancestors and I am going to make you great. And Gennean, if you put it out there and you trust me, I got you, girl. Ooh. And so I live in that. I live in that every day. I have to believe that God's got me. And that's what keeps me going. It's my faith. It's my faith and it's my belief that God's got my back and I'm going to do it. He's not going to let me fail.
No. Okay, so one last question. In this season of the show, we're talking about people who have found or are finding their voice to impact the world. What does that mean for you? And have you actually found your voice? And if you have, now that you have our attention, what do you want to say?
I think I have. And it's what I told my kids, my dancers, I call them my kids, before I left Nebraska. And it's what I told my daughter. And is that no one is going to love you more than you. And you teach people how to treat you. And you teach people how to interact with you. And in knowing that, be and expect nothing but the best. And so I try to be my best self every day because I know that there are plenty of people who have similar stories of mine, when it comes to growing up, when it comes to being a teen mom, and it comes to not following your dream because you don't know that you can afford to do those things. But trust you. Bet on you. Bet on you. And it's good. It's good because I'm telling you, nobody's going to love you like you love you. And bet on yourself, and you will achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve, because you are good enough. You are better than good enough. You it's the bomb.com. And don't let nobody ever tell you anything different.
Oh, you touched me just now.
No,
But it's true.
it's real.
You got to bet on you, because who if you don't, who will? You know.
You got to believe it first.
Gennean, thank you so much for your time today. I so
Thank you,
appreciate you coming on.
Always. Oh my gosh. I'm like fangirl, and I was like, oh, let me listen to this. Let me listen to this. So thank you. Thank you for having me. I listened to some of your previous guests, and I mean, they are super inspiring, and you are inspiring, and you taking this opportunity to lift these voices is wonderful. And I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. And if you are ever in the area, please, let's do lunch.
We're going to go see a play.
Yes. Oh, yes. We're going to go see a play, of course, but we're going to
we'll do lunch too.
Something. Yeah. We're going to break bread. We're going to
break bread. Break bread together.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you, Gennean. And to those of you who are watching or listening, remember, we all have a voice. Use yours wisely. Bye, everyone. Thank you again, Gennean.
Thank you.